The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the darkness between stars like a giant metal city. Its silver walls stretched for miles in every direction. Thousands of ships from across the galaxy docked at its many ports. Inside the station's great hall, representatives from over 200 alien species gathered for the most important meeting of the year. Ambassador Lee Dong-yun adjusted his simple black suit as he walked through the enormous chamber. The ceiling rose so high above them that clouds actually formed near the top. Alien voices echoed from every direction, speaking in languages that sounded like music, grinding rocks or flowing water. Behind Lee walked his two companions. Park Min-ho carried a briefcase full of documents and tried not to stare at the strange creatures around them. Kim Sora held a recording device and notebook, writing down everything she saw. All three humans looked very small compared to the giants that surrounded them. Their assigned seats were in the back corner of the hall. The area was so small that Lee had to squeeze between Park and Kim just to sit down. Other delegations had entire sections with comfortable chairs and tables full of food. The humans had 3 metal chairs that barely fit together. "Look at where they put us," Park whispered. His voice sounded tired and angry. "Even the insect people got better seats than this." Kim nodded toward a group of bug-like creatures near the front. They sat on silk cushions and had servants bringing them sweet-smelling drinks. "At least we made it inside the hall," she said quietly. "That's more than most people expected." Lee said nothing. He had learned long ago that complaining would not help their situation. Instead, he watched as the session began. A massive creature stepped up to the speaking platform. Chancellor Vrex of the Draconian Empire stood 12 feet tall and looked like a dragon that learned to walk on 2 legs. His scales were dark green and reflected the lights like metal armor. When he opened his mouth to speak, everyone could see teeth as long as knives. "Fellow members of the Galactic Assembly," Vrex said. His voice was so deep that it made the floor shake under their feet. "We gather today to discuss a most unusual request. The species calling themselves humans have asked to join our military alliance." Laughter started immediately. It began with a few small chuckles from the front rows, then spread through the hall like a wave. Soon the entire chamber filled with the sounds of 200 different species all laughing at the same time. Some made noise like barking dogs. Others sounded like steam escaping from pipes. A few just clicked their teeth together very fast. Lee kept his face calm, but Park could see his hands tighten into fists on his lap. Kim continued writing in her notebook, but her pencil pressed so hard it nearly tore the paper. Vrex raised one clawed hand and the laughter slowly stopped. "Yes, I know it seems funny, but we must consider this request seriously, as we do all others." He paused and looked directly at the human section. "Even when that request comes from such a small and weak species." More laughter filled the hall. This time it was louder and lasted longer. "Let me share with you what our intelligence reports tell us about humans," Vrex continued. He pulled out a large document that glowed with blue text. "They have no natural armor to protect their soft skin. They have no claws or teeth worth mentioning. They cannot fly without machines. They cannot breathe in space without special suits." Each point brought fresh waves of laughter from the audience. Lee watched as alien delegates pointed at the human section and made jokes to their neighbors. "Their physical strength is pathetic," Vrex went on. "A single warrior from my species could easily defeat 50 of their best soldiers. They are so weak that they break their own bones just from running too much." The Hive Queen Zix clicked her mandibles together in amusement. She looked like a giant beetle with 6 arms and jeweled eyes. "Tell them about their lifespans, Chancellor," she called out. "I hear they only live for about 100 years. "Ah, yes," Vrex smiled, showing all of his knife teeth. "These creatures live such short lives that they barely have time to learn anything useful. Most of our species live for thousands of years. We have officers in our military who are older than their entire civilization." The laughter was becoming cruel now. Lee could hear aliens making jokes about humans being pets or food animals. Some suggested that humans might be useful for cleaning floors or carrying messages. A tall, thin creature made of what looked like living crystal stood up. This was Prism, the representative of the Crystal Coalition. When she spoke, her voice sounded like wind chimes. "Surely they cannot be serious about joining our military alliance," she said. "What could they possibly offer? Their technology is centuries behind ours. Their weapons could not even scratch our armor." "That brings me to the most amusing part," Vrex said. He was clearly enjoying himself now. "Our reports say that humans still practice something called martial arts. They actually spend time learning to fight with their bare hands and with metal. Swords. The laughter that followed was so loud that the station's computer systems had to dampen the sound to protect everyone's hearing. Aliens were falling out of their chairs and rolling on the floor. Some were laughing so hard that tears streamed down their faces. Metal swords, repeated General Korvac of the Ursine Confederation. He looked like a giant bear that learned to wear military uniforms. In an age of plasma weapons and energy shields, they fight with metal swords. Perhaps, suggested the Hive Queen, we should find them work as entertainers. Their fighting shows might amuse our children. Or as servants, added another voice. They seem perfectly sized for cleaning small spaces. Lee finally stood up. The movement was so unexpected that some of the laughter died away. He walked to the small microphone they had been given and turned it on. Honorable members of the Assembly, he began. His voice was calm and clear. Humanity formally requests consideration for military alliance status. We believe we can contribute significantly to galactic defense. The hall exploded in the loudest laughter yet. Some aliens were making sounds like crying babies. Others were imitating what they thought human fighting looked like, waving their arms around randomly. Rex wiped tears from his large yellow eyes. Very well, Ambassador Lee. We will put your request to a vote. He looked around the chamber with obvious amusement. All in favor of accepting humanity into our military alliance? Not a single hand, claw, or tentacle was raised. All opposed? Every delegate in the hall raised their hand. The vote was unanimous. The request is denied, Vrex announced. Perhaps humans would be better suited to agricultural work or simple manufacturing. We would be happy to discuss protection agreements for your colonies. In exchange for our military protection, you could provide us with workers and resources. As Lee sat back down, he could hear aliens making plans to divide up human territory. They talked about human colonies like they were discussing what to have for dinner. Kim stopped writing and looked at her companions. What do we do now? She whispered. Park stared at the floor. I don't know. Maybe we should have stayed home. Lee was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small communication device. He typed a short message and sent it toward Earth. The message was simple. Plan B. The session ended with alien delegates filing out of the hall, still laughing and making jokes. Most of them had already forgotten about the humans entirely. They had more important things to discuss, like trade agreements and territorial disputes between real military powers. As the three humans gathered their things and prepared to leave, none of the aliens paid them any attention. They were dismissed, ignored, and forgotten. But Lee's message was already traveling through space toward Earth, where people were waiting for exactly this signal. People who had spent their entire lives preparing for the moment when humanity would need to prove itself to the galaxy. The aliens had made their choice. Now humanity would make theirs. The real test was about to begin. 3 days passed since the Assembly rejected humanity's request. Lee Dongyun sat in his small quarters aboard Nexus Prime, reading reports on his tablet. The news from Earth was not good. Several alien species had already sent ships toward human colonies, claiming they needed to provide protection. Park Minho burst through the door without knocking. His face was red with anger and his hands shook as he held up his own tablet. Lee, you need to see this immediately. Kim Sora followed right behind him. She looked worried and kept glancing over her shoulder as if someone might be following them. The situation just got much worse, she said. Lee set down his tablet and looked at his companions. What happened? General Korvac made an announcement 1 hour ago, Park said. He was breathing hard like he had been running. The Ursine Confederation is claiming 12 of our outer colonies as protectorates. They say since we cannot defend ourselves, they have the right to take control. Kim opened her notebook and read from it. He said that human colonies are too valuable to leave unprotected. The Ursines will provide military defense in exchange for mining rights and administrative control. That means they own everything, Park added. Our people become their workers. Our resources become their property. Lee felt his stomach tighten. This was exactly what Earth's government had feared would happen. Are they the only ones? No, Kim said quietly. 3 other species have made similar announcements. The Crystal Coalition wants our manufacturing colonies. The Hive Queen claimed our agricultural worlds. Even the Ethereal Collective said they might need to step in to maintain peace. Lee stood up and walked to the small window. Outside, he could see alien warships moving through space. Some of them were already heading toward human territory. How long do we have? The Ursine fleet will reach our colonies in 6 days, Park said. The others are not far behind. Have you sent this information to Earth? Yes, but what can they do? Kim asked. Our entire space fleet could not stop even one of those battleships. General Korvac's flagship is the size of a small moon. Lee was quiet for several minutes. His companions waited, hoping he had some kind of plan. Finally, he turned back to them. I am calling for an emergency session of the Assembly. Park stared at him. Why, they will just laugh at us again. Maybe, Lee said. But there is something I want to try. Earth did not send me here just to ask nicely for membership. They sent me here because sometimes diplomacy requires taking risks. 2 hours later, the Assembly Hall was filled again. Not all of the delegates had returned, but enough were present to make official decisions. Many of them looked annoyed at being called back so soon. Chancellor Vrex took his place at the speaking platform. Ambassador Lee has requested this emergency session. I assume he wishes to discuss the protection agreements that several of our members have generously offered to his species. Lee walked to the human microphone. This time he did not look nervous or uncertain. His voice was clear and strong. I am here to address the illegal claims that have been made against human territory. Laughter rippled through the hall, but it was quieter than before. Some of the delegates seemed curious about what the human would say. There is nothing illegal about protecting defenseless colonies, General Korvac called out. The massive bear creature stood up in his section. Your species has no military worth mentioning. Your colonies are easy targets for pirates and raiders. We are doing you a favor. We did not ask for your protection, Lee replied, and we do not need it. This brought louder laughter. The Hive Queen clicked her mandibles in amusement. Human, your entire military could not defeat a single one of our scout ships. How can you possibly defend your colonies against real threats? Lee smiled. It was not a happy smile, but one that made some of the aliens feel slightly uncomfortable. You have made many assumptions about humanity based on incomplete information. You think we are weak because we do not have natural armor or claws. You think we are primitive because we still practice martial arts. Are we wrong? Vrex asked. The dragon-like creature leaned forward with interest. You are about to find out, Lee said. I invoke the ancient right of trial by combat to settle this dispute. The laughter stopped immediately. Every delegate in the hall turned to stare at the human. Trial by combat was an old galactic tradition, but it had not been used in over 1,000 years. Most species had forgotten it even existed. Chancellor Vrex looked confused. You cannot be serious. I am completely serious, Lee replied. According to galactic law, any species may challenge decisions of the Assembly through ritual combat. If our champion can defeat your champions, humanity gains the right to defend our own territory without interference. Vrex consulted with other delegates for several minutes. They spoke in whispers and kept looking at the humans with puzzled expressions. Finally, the Chancellor returned to the microphone. The law does allow for trial by combat, he admitted. But human, do you understand what you are asking? You would need to defeat champions from multiple species. These are warriors who have never known defeat. I understand perfectly, Lee said. General Korvac stood up again. His voice was filled with excitement. I accept this challenge. My champion will crush any warrior you can send. As do I, said the Crystal Coalition representative. Our champion has never been injured in battle. And I, added the Hive Queen. This should be entertaining. Soon half the Assembly was volunteering their champions. The aliens were eager to participate in what they saw as an easy victory. Some were already discussing how they would divide human territory after the combat ended. Vrex raised his hand for silence. Very well. The challenge is accepted. According to tradition, humanity may send one champion to face all challengers. The combat will continue until either the human warrior is defeated or all alien champions have been beaten. And if our champion wins, Lee asked, then humanity will be granted full military alliance status with all rights and privileges, Vrex replied. Your species will be recognized as equals and your territory will be protected by galactic law. And if we lose? Then human colonies will be distributed among the victorious species as they see fit. Your people will become subjects of those who defeat your champion. The stakes could not be higher. If humanity lost, their entire civilization would become property of alien empires. If they won, they would gain respect and protection throughout the galaxy. Park grabbed Lee's arm. Are you insane? He whispered. We cannot win this. You have seen their champions. They are monsters. Kim was writing frantically in her notebook. Lee, Earth never authorized you to make this kind of agreement. You are gambling with the lives of every human in the galaxy. Lee looked at his companions calmly. Sometimes the greatest risks lead to the greatest rewards. Besides, I did not make this decision alone. He pulled out his communication device and showed them the response to his Plan B message. It was just 2 words and champion ready. Vrex was consulting with other assembly members about the rules of combat. The trial will take place in 3 days, he announced. This will give your champion time to arrive and prepare. The combat arena will be configured to allow for multiple environmental settings to ensure fairness. 3 days is acceptable. Lee replied. I am curious, said the Hive Queen. What kind of warrior will humanity send? One of your space marines? A pilot from your fighter squadrons? You will see when he arrives, Lee said simply. General Korvac laughed. It does not matter what you send. My champion Brutus has never lost a fight. He can tear through starship armor with his bare claws. Your warrior will not survive the first 30 seconds. My champion has skin like diamonds, added the crystal representative. Your primitive weapons cannot even scratch him. More alien delegates began describing their champions. Each one sounded more terrifying than the last. They spoke of warriors who could breathe poison gas, fighters who could become invisible, and champions who were immune to all known weapons. Lee listened to all of this without changing expression. When they were finished, he spoke into the microphone one more time. You have told us about your champion's natural advantages, their armor, their size, their special abilities, but you have forgotten something important. And what is that? Vrex asked. You have never fought someone who refuses to lose. The session ended with alien delegates making bets on how quickly the human champion would fall. Most thought the fight would be over in less than a minute. A few generous ones gave the human warrior as much as 5 minutes before defeat. As the 3 humans left the hall, they could hear aliens laughing and planning victory celebrations. None of them seemed worried about the outcome, but Lee was not worried either. Earth's message had been clear. The champion was ready and he was already on his way. In 3 days, the galaxy would learn what humanity was truly capable of. The real fight was about to begin. 3 days passed like a countdown to disaster. The betting pools on Nexus Prime grew larger each hour. Aliens from across the galaxy wagered on how quickly the human champion would fall. The odds reached 1,000 to 1 against humanity surviving even the first match. Lee Donghyun spent the time in quiet preparation. He meditated in his quarters and spoke with Earth through encrypted channels. Park Min-ho paced nervously and checked the news feeds every few minutes. Kim Sora documented everything, knowing that these might be the last free days of human civilization. On the morning of the trial, the combat arena filled with spectators. The massive crystalline dome could hold 50,000 beings and every seat was taken. Alien delegates brought their families to watch what they expected to be a quick and entertaining execution. The arena floor stretched out like a small city. Advanced technology could create any environment within minutes. Mountains, oceans, forests, or barren wastelands could appear at the touch of a button. The dome's walls were transparent, allowing everyone to see clearly while protecting them from the violence inside. Chancellor Vrex stood at the center speaking platform. His voice boomed through speakers that reached every corner of the station. Citizens of the galaxy, today we witness an ancient tradition. The species called humanity has challenged our decision through trial by combat. Cheers and laughter echoed through the arena. Many aliens held signs mocking humanity or showing pictures of their favorite champions. The rules are simple, Vrex continued. Humanity will send 1 champion to face our warriors in single combat. The human must defeat at least 3 champions to earn basic recognition. If they somehow defeat all challengers, they will gain full alliance status. But when they lose, General Korvac roared from his VIP section, human colonies become the property of the victorious species. More cheers filled the arena. Some aliens were already dividing up human territory on their tablets. Where is this human champion? Called out the Hive Queen. Are they too afraid to show themselves? Lee stood up in the human section. The 3 humans looked very small and alone in their tiny viewing area. Our champion is present and ready to begin. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. Aliens looked around the arena and saw only empty space. The combat area was completely clear except for the sandy floor. Vrex consulted his scanning equipment. I detect no additional life forms in the arena. Ambassador Lee, your champion must enter the combat zone before we can begin. He is already here, Lee said calmly. This is ridiculous. General Korvac stood up angrily. The humans are trying to delay the inevitable with tricks and games. The Hive Queen clicked her mandibles together. Perhaps their champion is so small we cannot see him. Maybe they sent an insect. Laughter filled the arena again. Some aliens joked that humanity had sent a bacteria or a virus to fight for them. Suddenly, the arena's environment controls activated. The sandy floor dissolved and was replaced by a moonlit forest. Tall trees rose from the ground and a gentle breeze began to blow. Artificial moonlight filtered down through the leaves, creating shifting patterns of light and shadow. In the center of the arena, where empty space had been just moments before, a figure stood perfectly still. He wore simple black clothing that seemed to absorb the moonlight. Two curved swords hung at his side, their plain wooden handles showing no decoration. His face was partially hidden, but his dark eyes were clearly visible. The sudden appearance shocked everyone into silence. No one had seen him enter. No one had detected his movement. He had simply materialized like a shadow given form. The figure bowed respectfully toward the viewing stands. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly through the arena despite being barely above a whisper. I am Cho Jae-won, and I answer the challenge on behalf of humanity. The silence stretched on as 40,000 alien minds tried to process what they had just witnessed. Even the most advanced sensors in the arena had not detected his presence until he chose to reveal himself. Chancellor Vrex was the first to recover. How did you enter the arena without being detected? Jae-won remained perfectly still. I have been here since the beginning. You simply were not looking in the right way. General Korvac stood up, his massive form towering over the viewing area. Enough games. Brutus, crush this insect. The first champion entered the arena through a mechanical doorway. Brutus was a mountain of muscle and fur that stood 3 meters tall. His arms were as thick as tree trunks and ended in claws that could rend metal. Scars covered his body from 100 victories. When he roared, the sound shook the entire arena. The contrast was shocking. Brutus looked like a living siege engine built for destruction. Jae-won appeared as fragile as a reed that might break in a strong wind. The size difference was so extreme that many aliens wondered if this was some kind of joke. Brutus began to circle his opponent, his massive feet leaving deep prints in the forest floor. I will make this quick, little human, he growled. I promise you will not suffer long. Jae-won did not move or speak. He stood like a statue in the center of the clearing, his hands relaxed at his sides. His breathing was so quiet that the arena's sensitive microphones could barely detect it. Is he even alive? Someone called out from the crowd. Maybe he died of fear, another alien joked. Brutus grew tired of waiting. With a roar that shattered tree branches, he charged across the clearing. His massive bulk built up tremendous momentum as he covered the distance in seconds. His claws extended, ready to tear the human apart. Jae-won waited until the last possible moment. When Brutus was less than a meter away, moving fast enough to crush a normal being, the human finally moved. It was not a desperate dodge or a panicked leap to safety. Jae-won simply stepped to one side while drawing his katana in a motion too smooth and fast for most eyes to follow. The blade whispered through the air in a perfect arc that seemed to bend the moonlight around it. Brutus crashed into the trees behind where Jae-won had been standing. His charge carried him forward for several more steps before confusion crossed his massive features. He looked down at his chest where a thin red line had appeared across his supposedly impenetrable hide. The cut went completely through his natural armor and the reinforced vest beneath it. It was so precise that it had not damaged any vital organs, but so perfectly placed that it severed just enough muscle to end the fight. Brutus collapsed to his knees, then fell forward, unconscious, but alive. Jae-won had already sheathed his sword and was bowing respectfully to his fallen opponent. The arena was completely silent, except for the artificial wind rustling through the trees. 40,000 beings sat in stunned disbelief at what they had just witnessed. The first champion of the Ursine Confederation, who had never lost a battle in 50 years of combat, had been defeated in a single move by a human with a metal sword. Jae-won straightened from his bow and looked toward the viewing stands. His voice carried clearly through the silence. I am ready for the next challenger. The real education of the Galactic Assembly had begun. The silence in the arena stretched on for nearly a full minute. No one moved. No one spoke. 40,000 aliens stared at the human warrior who stood calmly in the moonlit forest as if nothing unusual had happened. Finally, Chancellor Vrex found his voice. "Medical team to the arena floor," he announced. His words seemed to break the spell that had fallen over the crowd. A team of alien medics rushed to examine Brutus. They confirmed what everyone had seen but could not believe. The massive Ursine warrior was alive but unconscious. The cut across his chest was so precise that it had stopped exactly where it needed to avoid permanent damage. "Impossible," General Korvac muttered from his viewing section. "Brutus has fought in over 200 battles. His hide armor has stopped plasma weapons." "The human used a primitive metal blade," added another Ursine officer. "Our champion should have crushed him without effort." Whispers began to spread through the crowd. Some aliens were checking their scanning equipment to see if they had missed something. Others were reviewing the combat footage in slow motion, trying to understand what had happened. The Hive Queen stood up in her section. "One victory proves nothing," she declared. "Perhaps the Ursine champion was overconfident. Crystallis will not make the same mistake." The second champion entered the arena as the forest environment dissolved around them. The new setting was a crystalline cavern with walls that reflected light in beautiful rainbow patterns. This was the natural environment of the Crystal Coalition, giving their champion every possible advantage. Crystallis stepped into the arena like a living work of art. Her body was formed from diamond-hard crystal that caught and scattered the light into brilliant displays. She stood nearly as tall as Brutus, but moved with fluid grace that made her seem to dance rather than walk. As she moved, razor-sharp crystal blades formed along her arms. Each one was perfectly transparent and nearly invisible except for the way they bent the light around them. When she struck the arena wall as a test, the blades cut through solid metal like it was soft clay. "Your primitive weapon cannot even scratch my surface," Crystallis said. Her voice sounded like wind chimes singing in a gentle breeze. "I am harder than starship armor." Jaewon drew both of his swords this time, the katana in his right hand and a shorter wakizashi in his left. Unlike the crystal weapons that gleamed and sparkled, his blades seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "We shall see," he said simply. Crystallis attacked with calculated precision. Each movement was perfectly balanced and mathematically precise. Her crystal blades created beautiful light shows as they cut through the air, leaving trails of rainbow color behind them. But Jaewon moved like flowing water around her attacks. Where Crystallis was precise and calculated, he was fluid and adaptive. His two swords worked together in patterns that seemed more like a deadly dance than a fight. The sound of crystal striking steel rang through the arena like a symphony. Each impact created showers of sparks and refracted light that painted the cavern walls in shifting colors. To the watching aliens, it looked more like art than combat. Then Jaewon began to find his rhythm. His strikes became faster and more focused. Each impact with Crystallis's crystal armor happened at exactly the same spot, over and over again. "What is he doing?" someone called out from the crowd. Kim Sora had been watching carefully through binoculars. "He is finding stress points in the crystal structure," she explained to Park and Lee. "Each strike is building up microfractures along the same lines." The aliens in the arena began to see it too. Hair-thin cracks were appearing in Crystallis's supposedly impenetrable armor. The cracks followed precise geometric patterns that spread across her surface like spiderwebs. Crystallis realized what was happening and tried to change her fighting style. But it was too late. Jaehwan's final combination of strikes hit 3 specific points simultaneously. The Crystal Champion's entire armor structure cracked along perfect stress lines. She could feel her exoskeleton about to shatter completely. Rather than risk permanent damage, she raised her hands in surrender. "I yield," she announced. "The human warrior has defeated me." Jaewon immediately stepped back and bowed deeply to his opponent. "Your skill and courage honor your people," he said formally. The arena was silent again, but this time the silence felt different. It was not the shocked disbelief of before, but something closer to awe. The aliens were beginning to realize they might have seriously underestimated humanity. 2 victories, Chancellor Vrex announced. The human champion has earned basic recognition for his species. "But the real test begins now," called out a new voice. The speaker was a delegate from the Void Collective, beings made of condensed dark matter and energy. "Nullus, show this primitive what true power looks like." The third champion did not walk into the arena. Instead, it materialized from the shadows themselves. Nullus was a being of living darkness that seemed to absorb light and warmth from everything around it. When it moved, reality itself seemed to bend and twist. The arena environment changed to a barren wasteland under a starless sky. This was a place where normal matter barely existed, giving the void entity its greatest advantage. "I am entropy made manifest," Nullus spoke without vocal cords. Its voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. "I am the end of all things. Your weapons cannot touch what does not truly exist." Tendrils of pure entropy lashed out from Nullus's form. Wherever they touched the arena floor, matter simply ceased to exist. They left behind perfectly spherical holes that went down into nothingness. Jaehwan studied his opponent carefully. This was unlike anything he had faced before. How do you fight something that can unmake matter itself? The answer came to him as he watched the patterns of the entity's attacks. Nullus might be made of dark energy, but it still followed certain rules. It had to maintain coherence to exist in this reality, which meant it had structure. Jaehwan began to move in ways that seemed to defy physics. His swords cut through the air in precise patterns that created temporary distortions in space around them. Where other warriors would have tried to avoid the entropy tendrils, he moved directly toward them. But something impossible happened. His blades, which should have been destroyed instantly upon contact with pure entropy, instead seemed to cut through the dark energy itself. Each strike disrupted Nullus's form and forced it to pull back. How? Nullus's voice was filled with confusion and something that might have been fear. "You wield mere metal. You cannot cut that which has no substance. All things have form," Jaehwan replied as he continued his assault. "Even nothingness must have shape to exist in this reality." His final attack was a spinning combination that created a whirlwind of steel around the dark entity. Each blade found the invisible boundaries that held Nullus together and severed them one by one. The Void Champion began to dissolve, its dark matter dispersing into the empty space around them. Rather than face complete dissolution, it withdrew its essence back to the viewing stands. "The darkness yields to the light of discipline," Nullus admitted before fading away completely. 3 champions defeated, 3 supposedly impossible victories. Jaehwan stood alone in the center of the arena, waiting calmly for the next challenger. His breathing was still perfectly steady. His sword showed no signs of damage despite cutting through crystal and dark energy. The aliens in the viewing stands were no longer laughing. Many were checking their equipment again, wondering if they were witnessing some kind of elaborate illusion. Others were furiously recalculating the odds and placing new bets, but most were simply staring at the human warrior in growing amazement. How was a single being with primitive weapons defeating champions that had never known defeat? "Who wishes to face me next?" Jaehwan asked politely. The silence that followed was no longer filled with mockery or disbelief. For the first time since humanity had entered galactic politics, it was filled with something approaching respect, and perhaps, in some corners of the arena, the first hints of fear. The demonstration was far from over. The 4th challenger entered the arena with confidence that quickly turned to concern. Mindhan of the Ethereal Collective was a being of pure psychic energy who had never faced an opponent whose mind he could not dominate. He appeared as a shifting form of golden light that hurt to look at directly. The arena environment changed to a void filled with swirling colors and impossible geometry. This was a place where thought became reality and mental strength determined everything. "Your primitive mind will be easy to break," Mindhan announced. His voice echoed inside the heads of everyone watching. "I will show you visions of your worst fears until you beg for mercy." Waves of psychic energy crashed against Jaehwan like invisible tsunamis. The attacks were designed to overwhelm his mind with terror, pain, and despair. Every alien watching expected to see the human collapse in seconds. Instead, Jaehwan stood unmoved. His mind was like a fortress built from decades of meditation and mental discipline. Where Mindhan expected to find fear and weakness, he found only calm emptiness. "Impossible," the psychic entity recoiled. "Your mind is like trying to grasp flowing water. There is nothing for my powers to hold on to." Jaehwan moved through the psychic storm as if it were a gentle breeze. His swords cut through the waves of mental energy, disrupting them and sending them back toward their source. Each strike was perfectly focused, targeting the specific frequencies that held Mindhan's form together. Within minutes, the ethereal champion was forced to retreat. His psychic form flickered and began to fade as he lost concentration. The human mind is stronger than I believed possible, Mindhan admitted before disappearing entirely. Before the crowd could fully process this victory, the fifth champion was already entering the arena. Leviathan of the Aquatic Federation was a creature the size of a battleship, with tentacles that could crush submarines. The arena filled with water to accommodate his massive form. I rule the depths of 100 worlds, Leviathan boomed. His voice created whirlpools in the water around him. No land creature can match me in my element. But Jaehuan moved through the water as if it were air. His strikes found their mark despite the resistance of the liquid environment. Where other warriors would have been slowed and weakened by fighting underwater, he seemed to gain speed and grace. Leviathan's tentacles, each one thicker than a tree trunk, could not even touch the human warrior. Jaehuan flowed around them like a current, always moving, always striking at exactly the right moment. The aquatic giant was forced to surrender when Jaehuan's blades found the nerve clusters that controlled his movement. Like all the others, he yielded with dignity rather than face permanent injury. 6 champions defeated, then 7, then 8. Each victory followed the same pattern. The alien champions relied on their natural advantages, size, strength, armor, special abilities. But Jaehuan defeated them all through perfect technique, flawless timing, and an almost supernatural awareness of his opponent's intentions. Between matches, Ambassador Li stood to address the increasingly nervous assembly. His voice carried clearly through the arena's speakers. Honored delegates, you are witnessing something that your species may not understand. What you call weakness, we call opportunity for growth. What you call primitive, we call refined through centuries of dedication. Park Min-ho added his own explanation during the break. Jaehuan represents something unique to humanity. While other species rely on the gifts given to them by evolution, humans have spent thousands of years learning to overcome their limitations through discipline and training. Kim Sora consulted her notes and spoke about human history. Our species has always faced impossible odds. We hunted creatures many times our size with simple tools. We crossed frozen continents and burning deserts. We learned to fly even though we have no wings, to swim though we have no gills, to survive in space though we cannot breathe vacuum. But how is this possible? Called out a delegate from the crowd. Your champion is still just flesh and blood. Our champions have natural advantages that should be insurmountable. Lee smiled. That is exactly the point. Humans do not accept that anything is insurmountable. We believe that any obstacle can be overcome through sufficient dedication and proper understanding. The 9th champion was a living suit of armor from the Iron Clans. The 10th could become invisible at will. The 11th could split into multiple copies of itself. Each one brought abilities that seemed impossible to defeat with simple swords and human reflexes. Yet Jaehuan found ways to overcome them all. Against the armored warrior, he found the joints and weak points that no weapon had ever reached. Against the invisible opponent, he fought by sound and air movement alone. Against the multiple copies, he identified the real one through subtle differences in their fighting patterns. The aliens began to understand that they were not just watching combat. They were witnessing a completely different philosophy of existence. Where their species had evolved to survive through natural gifts, humans had evolved to survive through constant adaptation and improvement. Your champion, Chancellor Vrex asked during another break. How many years did he train to reach this level? Jaehuan began his training at age 5, Lee replied. He is now 32 years old. He has spent 27 years perfecting his skills. The dragon-like Chancellor did some quick calculations. That is more than a quarter of his entire lifespan. Most of our warriors train for a few decades out of lives that last millennia. For humans, Kim explained, mastery is not something you achieve and then stop. It is a lifelong journey of constant improvement. Jaehuan will continue training until the day he dies. This concept shocked many of the alien delegates. They could not understand why someone would spend such a large portion of their short life learning to fight. It seemed wasteful and inefficient. But as they watched Jaehuan face his 12th opponent, they began to see the results of that dedication. Every movement was perfect. Every decision was exactly right. There was no wasted motion, no hesitation, no doubt. The 12th champion was Ragnar of the Storm Giants, a being who could control lightning and thunder. The arena filled with crackling energy as he summoned a devastating electrical storm. Let me see you cut through lightning, little human, Ragnar roared as bolts of energy rained down from artificial storm clouds. Jaehuan's response defied understanding. His swords moved in patterns that seemed to guide the lightning away from his body. Where the electrical bolts should have killed him instantly, they instead flowed around him like water around a stone. The storm giant increased his attack, calling down enough electrical energy to power a small city. But Jae-hwan continued to deflect and redirect every bolt until Ragnar exhausted himself and collapsed. "Impossible," the giant whispered as medics helped him from the arena. "No one can turn aside the power of storms." 12 champions defeated. The crowd was no longer making noise at all. They watched in complete fascination as patterns began to emerge from each victory. Jae-hwan was not winning through superior strength or advanced technology. He was winning because he understood something fundamental about combat that the aliens had never learned. Every opponent had weaknesses, no matter how powerful they seemed. Every attack created openings, no matter how devastating. Every advantage could be turned into a disadvantage if approached correctly. But more than that, Jae-hwan fought with a calmness and respect that none of the aliens had expected. He never taunted his opponents or celebrated their defeats. He helped wounded champions leave the arena with dignity. He bowed to each one as an acknowledgement of their skill and courage. This behavior confused many of the watching aliens. In their cultures, combat was about domination and humiliation. But Jae-hwan treated each fight as a learning experience and each opponent as a teacher. "Why does he show such respect to those he defeats?" asked the Hive Queen during one break. Lee considered the question carefully. "Because Jae-hwan understands that true strength comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down. Each opponent makes him stronger by testing his abilities. He honors them for that gift." As the 13th champion entered the arena, many aliens were beginning to reconsider their assumptions about humanity. Perhaps these creatures were not as primitive as they had believed. Perhaps they had something to teach the galaxy after all. But the greatest test was still to come. Chancellor Vrex himself was preparing to enter the arena, and his power was legendary throughout the known galaxy. The real measure of human determination was about to begin. After defeating 15 champions from across the galaxy, Jae-hwan stood in the center of the arena, as calm as when he had first appeared. His breathing remained steady. His sword showed no signs of wear despite cutting through crystal, energy, and metal stronger than starship armor. The viewing stands were completely silent now. No one laughed. No one made jokes. 40,000 beings watched with growing amazement as this single human warrior accomplished what they had believed impossible. Chancellor Vrex rose from his seat in the VIP section. The massive dragon-like being stretched his wings and spoke in a voice that shook the entire station. "Enough," he declared. "I will face this human myself." A ripple of excitement and fear went through the crowd. Vrex was not just the leader of the Draconian Empire. He was also their greatest warrior, undefeated in combat for over 2,000 years. His power was the stuff of legends throughout the galaxy. "Chancellor," protested one of his advisors, "this is beneath your station. Let another champion face the human." "No," Vrex replied. "This warrior has earned the right to face me directly. I will not send others to do what I should do myself." The Chancellor leaped from his viewing platform, his massive form descending toward the arena floor. As he fell, his body began to change. His diplomatic robes dissolved, revealing scales that gleamed like polished armor. His size increased until he stood nearly 5 meters tall. When Vrex landed in the arena, the impact cracked the reinforced floor. His transformation was complete. He looked like a dragon from ancient human mythology, but larger and more terrifying than any story had ever described. The arena environment shifted to accommodate their final battle. The setting became a volcanic landscape with rivers of lava and pillars of stone. This was Vrex's natural environment, where his fire-breathing abilities would have maximum effect. "Human warrior," Vrex said, his voice now a deep rumble that made the lava bubble and pop. "You have fought with great skill and honor. But I am not like the others. I am power beyond your understanding." Jae-hwan bowed respectfully to the Chancellor. "I am honored to face such a worthy opponent. May this battle bring wisdom to us both." Vrex studied the small human before him. Even after seeing 15 victories, the size difference was shocking. The Chancellor's claws were longer than Jae-hwan's entire body. His scales looked thick enough to stop artillery shells. "You may begin when ready," Vrex announced. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. It was not just a fight between two warriors. It was a clash between two completely different philosophies of power and existence. Vrex fought like a force of nature. His attacks were devastating and overwhelming. When he breathed fire, the flames were hot enough to melt through the arena's protective barriers. When he struck with his claws, they left gouges in the stone floor deep enough to hide a small vehicle. But Jaewon responded with something the aliens had never seen before. He did not try to match Vrex's power or avoid his attacks entirely. Instead, he used the Chancellor's own strength against him. When Vrex breathed fire, Jaewon moved through the flames using a technique that redirected the heat around his body. His sword somehow did not melt in the incredible temperature. The metal seemed to absorb and channel the energy rather than being destroyed by it. When Vrex struck with his massive claws, Jaewon used the Chancellor's momentum to enhance his own movements. He flowed around the attacks like water, always ending up in exactly the right position to strike back. The watching aliens began to see something that amazed them. Jaewon was not just surviving against overwhelming odds. He was thriving. Each of Vrex's attacks made the human warrior stronger and more focused. "How is this possible?" someone whispered in the crowd. Kim Sora provided the answer through her recording equipment. Her words broadcast throughout the arena. "This is what humans call turning disadvantage into advantage." Jaewon is not fighting against Vrex's power. He is fighting with it. The battle continued for what felt like hours but was actually only minutes. Vrex unleashed every technique he had learned in 2 millennia of combat. He created walls of fire that should have incinerated any opponent. He struck with combinations of claws and tail that had never been blocked or avoided. Yet Jaewon not only survived, but began to gain the upper hand. His movements became more fluid and precise as he adapted to Vrex's fighting style. His strikes found gaps in the Chancellor's defenses that no one had ever discovered. The climax came when Vrex gathered all his remaining strength for one final attack. He drew in a massive breath and prepared to unleash a concentrated beam of plasma that could melt through battleship armor. Instead of running or trying to block, Jaewon did something that defied all logic. He moved directly toward the attack, his katana held in a specific position that the watching aliens had never seen before. The plasma beam struck Jaewon directly. For a moment, the entire arena was filled with blinding light and heat that made the protective barriers glow white-hot. When the light faded, everyone expected to see nothing but ash where the human warrior had been standing. Instead, they saw Jaewon unharmed, his sword glowing with absorbed energy. Somehow, impossibly, he had redirected the plasma around his body while capturing its power in his blade. In the same fluid motion, he closed the distance to Vrex and placed the edge of his superheated sword against the Chancellor's throat. The massive dragon froze, realizing that a single movement would end his life. But Jaewon did not cut. He held the position for exactly 3 seconds, long enough to prove his victory, then stepped back and bowed deeply. "The battle is yours, Chancellor," he said formally. "Thank you for the honor of testing my skills against yours." Vrex stared at the human in complete amazement. He had been defeated, but he had also been spared. In his culture, such mercy was almost unknown. "How?" the Chancellor asked. "How did you turn my greatest attack into your victory?" "By understanding that all energy seeks balance," Jaewon replied. "Your fire was powerful, but power without direction destroys itself. I simply provided direction." Slowly, Vrex transformed back into his diplomatic form. The dragon scales faded and his size decreased until he stood as he had before the battle. But something fundamental had changed in his expression. "I yield," he announced to the silent arena. "The human champion has defeated me fairly and with honor." The silence that followed was the deepest yet. Vrex had not lost a battle in over 2,000 years. He was considered one of the most powerful beings in the known galaxy, yet he had been defeated by a human with metal swords. Finally, Vrex turned toward the viewing stands and spoke in a voice that carried to every corner of the arena. "Citizens of the galaxy, I formally announce that humanity has earned full recognition in our alliance. They have proven themselves worthy of our respect and partnership." But he continued speaking, and his next words would change galactic politics forever. "More than that, I declare that any species wishing to learn from humanity's martial traditions will be welcomed as students. We have much to learn from these remarkable beings." The arena erupted in sound for the first time since the battles began. But instead of laughter and mockery, the noise was applause and cheers. Alien delegates who had dismissed humanity hours before were now standing and showing their respect. Requests for cultural exchange programs began immediately. The Ethereal Collective wanted to study human meditation techniques. The Crystal Coalition sought to understand how discipline could overcome natural limitations. Even the Void Collective expressed interest in learning about mental fortification. As Jaewon quietly left the arena, many aliens tried to approach him. They wanted to ask questions, to understand how he had accomplished the impossible, but he had already faded back into shadow, disappearing as silently as he had first appeared. Ambassador Lee stood to address the assembly one final time. Humanity is honored to join the galactic community as equals. We look forward to sharing our knowledge and learning from yours. Park Min-ho was smiling for the first time in days. The colony protection fleets are already turning back, he reported. No one wants to anger our new allies. Kim Sora closed her notebook and looked around the arena. This changes everything, she said quietly. They finally understand what humans are capable of. But Lee knew the truth was even deeper than that. The galaxy had not just learned about human fighting ability. They had learned about human philosophy, determination, and the power of refusing to accept limitations. As the assembly session ended and delegates began to file out, conversations could be heard throughout the arena. Species that had ignored each other for centuries were making plans to visit Earth. Trade agreements were being discussed. Scientific partnerships were being proposed. The alien laughter had been replaced by something far more valuable. Genuine respect and curiosity about what humanity could teach them. When Vrex approached the human delegation as they prepared to leave, his manner was completely different from 3 days before. Ambassador Lee, he said formally, would it be possible for some of my people to visit your world? We wish to understand how your species creates such extraordinary warriors from seemingly ordinary beginnings. Lee considered the request carefully. This was exactly what Earth had hoped for a way. 6 months had passed since the trial by combat that changed everything. Earth had become one of the most visited worlds in the galaxy, with ships arriving daily from dozens of different species. What had once been humanity's greatest weakness was now seen as their greatest strength. Ambassador Lee Dong-hyun stood in the newly built Cultural Exchange Center on the outskirts of Tokyo. Through the massive windows, he could see training grounds where humans worked alongside aliens in ways that would have seemed impossible just months before. In one area, a group of young draconian warriors practiced sword forms under the guidance of Master Cho Jae-won. Their natural size and strength had been advantages in their old fighting style, but now they were learning to move with precision and control, instead of relying on brute force. Breathe deeply, Jae-won instructed as he demonstrated a complex kata. Feel the energy flow through your body like water through a riverbed. Force creates resistance, but flow creates power. The young dragons attempted to copy his movements, their massive forms struggling to achieve the fluid grace that came naturally to their human teacher. What they lacked in elegance, they made up for in dedication. Some had been training for 16 hours a day since arriving on Earth. Master, one of them asked during a break, how long did it take you to learn this form? Jae-won smiled patiently. I am still learning it. Each day brings new understanding. Mastery is not a destination, but a journey that never ends. This answer confused the young draconian, whose species typically measured achievement in concrete terms. But he was beginning to understand that human wisdom often came in the form of paradoxes that revealed deeper truths. In another section of the training complex, Park Min-ho was working with a group of Crystal Coalition scientists. They had come to Earth expecting to learn fighting techniques, but had discovered that human martial arts were really about problem-solving and mental discipline. Your crystal structures are perfect, Park explained as he examined their latest creation. But perfection can be a weakness if it cannot adapt to changing conditions. Let me show you something we call flexible strength. He demonstrated by bending a thin piece of bamboo until it nearly touched the ground, then releasing it to spring back to its original position. This plant survives storms that break mighty oak trees because it knows when to yield and when to resist. The crystal beings began to experiment with new forms that could bend without breaking. Within weeks, they had revolutionized their architecture and engineering. Their perfect crystalline cities were being rebuilt with new designs that could withstand forces. Their old structures could never have survived. Kim Sora had become the director of the Cultural Documentation Project, recording every interaction between humans and their alien students. Her reports were being studied throughout the galaxy as species tried to understand how such dramatic changes were possible. The most interesting development, she wrote in her latest report, is how the aliens are teaching us as much as we teach them. The exchange of knowledge flows both ways, creating innovations that neither species could have achieved alone. This was true throughout the compound. Ethereal collective healers were working with human doctors to develop new medical techniques that combined psychic healing with traditional surgery. Aquatic Federation engineers were helping humans design underwater cities using principles learned from ancient marine architecture. The Hive Queen herself had established a permanent embassy on Earth after her scientists discovered that human teamwork strategies could improve their collective intelligence networks. Her people were learning to value individual creativity within group harmony, a concept that had been completely foreign to their culture. But perhaps the most remarkable transformation was happening in the person of Chancellor Vrex himself. The mighty draconian leader had taken a leave of absence from his governmental duties to study personally with human masters. Today he sat in a simple meditation garden, trying to achieve the inner peace that Jehuan had demonstrated during their battle. For a being accustomed to commanding star fleets and ruling entire solar systems, sitting quietly and focusing on breathing was surprisingly difficult. "Chancellor," Jehuan said as he joined the meditation session, "you are trying too hard to control your thoughts. Let them flow like clouds across the sky. Observe them, but do not chase them." Vrex opened one massive eye. "Master, this is much more difficult than combat. In battle, I know what to do with my strength. Here, I feel helpless." "That feeling of helplessness is the beginning of wisdom," Jehuan replied. "When you stop trying to force solutions and start listening to deeper truths, real understanding becomes possible." It had taken months for Vrex to accept that his greatest challenge would not come from external enemies, but from his own impatience and desire for immediate results. The dragon who had conquered worlds was being humbled by the simple act of sitting still, but the changes in him were remarkable. His diplomatic style had become more thoughtful and less aggressive. Trade negotiations that once ended in threats now concluded with mutually beneficial agreements. Other species were commenting on how much more pleasant it was to work with the Draconian Empire. "Your people call this soft power," Vrex had told Lee during one of their regular meetings. "I am beginning to understand that influence through respect is more lasting than control through fear." The success of the Earth programs had inspired similar exchanges throughout the galaxy. Human teachers were now working on dozens of different worlds, each one adapting the principles of martial arts to local conditions and cultures. On the water world of Aquatica, humans taught underwater meditation techniques that helped the native species achieve new levels of mental clarity. On the crystal moon of Prismia, human flexibility training was being combined with crystalline precision to create new art forms of breathtaking beauty. But not every interaction was smooth. Some species struggled with concepts that seemed natural to humans. The mechanical beings of the Iron Collective could not understand why efficiency was less important than harmony. The gas-based entities of the Void Collective found physical training impossible and had to develop entirely spiritual practices. "We are learning that wisdom cannot be forced or rushed," Lee explained to a gathering of galactic ambassadors. "Each species must find their own path to understanding, guided by principles rather than rigid rules." This flexibility had become one of humanity's most valued contributions to galactic culture. Where other species offered absolute solutions, humans provided adaptable frameworks that could work across different biologies and philosophies. The military applications of human training were also proving revolutionary. Joint exercises between human and alien forces demonstrated combat effectiveness that neither could achieve alone. Human strategy and alien technology created combinations that were reshaping military thinking throughout the galaxy. General Korvac, who had once mocked human weakness, now commanded a mixed unit of Ursine and human soldiers that had become the most effective peacekeeping force in their sector of space. The bears provided strength and endurance, while the humans contributed tactics and adaptability. "I used to think bigger and stronger meant better," Korvac admitted during a recent interview. "Now I understand that the right technique can defeat any amount of raw power. My human soldiers have taught my people that intelligence is the ultimate weapon." But perhaps the most significant change was happening in the younger generation of aliens who had grown up during the cultural exchange. Children from dozens of species were learning human values alongside their own cultural traditions, creating a new generation that thought differently about conflict, cooperation, and personal growth. Young draconians were learning patience alongside power. Crystal beings were discovering creativity within structure. Even the collective species were beginning to value individual achievement as part of group success. We are witnessing the birth of a new galactic civilization, Kim observed as she watched a group of mixed-species children playing together in the compound's garden, one based on mutual respect and shared learning rather than competition and domination. The evening brought Lee's favorite time of day, when the training sessions ended and different species gathered together for meals and conversation. The dining hall had been designed to accommodate every type of biology, with atmospheric controls that created comfortable zones for air breathers, water dwellers, and energy beings. Tonight, Chancellor Vrek sat at a low table with several human masters, discussing philosophy over simple rice and vegetables. The sight of the mighty dragon leader eating modest human food while debating the nature of strength would have seemed impossible a year ago. "I have been thinking about something you said, Master Jawan," Vrek said between careful bites. "You told me that true victory is helping your enemy become your friend. But what if your enemy refuses to change?" Jawan considered the question while refilling his teacup. "Then you continue to be the example of what they could become. Sometimes the greatest teaching is simply living your principles, even when others reject them." "But surely there are times when force is necessary," argued a young Ursine officer who was visiting with General Korvac. "Force may be necessary,